I got two stories, two different videos, but it's about doppelgangers in real life. The first one was from these YouTubers, right? They're kind of like paranormal investigators, but they're all the way from Pakistan. It's three guys, and they basically just go to different parts of Pakistan that are like abandoned and stuff to explore. And this one specifically, right? The legend about that spot is that there's this jinn that anybody that goes near there, that demon torments them by turning into whoever is there. So basically an exact copy of you. And in the video, they literally catch it on camera, bro.
Way.
Yeah,
no
bro.
way.
So that's the first thing. That's the entity right there. That's the demon. Shout out to Nuke's Top 5.
What the? Nah, there's no way, bro. There's no way.
That's an exact replica of three of them, bro.
Come on, cat. There's no way, bro. I got the chills right now.
You're just staring back at them and
That's what the guy who went inside with the camera saw?
First he goes in, whatever, he sees a little shadow and right?
And then he goes back.
Then they both go together, and then that's when they like, oh, nah, there's three of them there. That's when they realize that it's them. They're looking at themselves, bro.
Fuck.
You know what I'm saying, bro? So that's like a real life case of a doppelganger and shit like that.
Okay.
And there was also another one, bro. So there was this video.
Nobody's really lived in this house since the early 1940s. This is the room where all the paranormal things happen. The legend is that the ghost of the warden's house is Gertrude. And you asked if I got scared. That scared me, that it answered me like that, because I didn't think that was coming. I can bring the bad doll back out if you want to. So the bad doll I've banished to the back corner over here.
You really actually hit it back.
The two sisters were here, and then the phone thing happened.
We actually were told during the tour, this reverend doesn't like when you ring his bell.
Oh, help me leave. Come give me a big hug.
What the? We just heard you downstairs.
Oh!
What the? Oh! Shit. Oh, there's a baby doll down here. Look at these right here.
Hello?
This is the class photo, one of the most disturbing and shocking photos of all time explained. Okay, so at first glance, this photo looks like an ordinary American high school class photo, right? That is true until you realize that the two boys in the upper left-hand corner shooting imaginary guns at the camera is none other than Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. A few weeks after this photo was taken at Columbine High School in 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold put an evil plan that they'd been working on for more than a year into action. The two seniors placed two bombs in the cafeteria as well as in their cars, which were parked in the school's lot. These bombs failed to detonate, but the two boys proceeded to shoot and kill 12 students and one teacher. They shot and injured a further 21 people, while 3 others were injured trying to escape the massacre. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold then committed suicide in the school library. It was revealed afterwards that the shooters hoped that their planned massacre would claim more lives than the Oklahoma City bombing, which took the lives of 168 people. This is one of the most famous and one of the worst school shootings of all time, and it's crazy that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold foreshadowed what they were doing in this class photo. Now when I look at this photo again, all I see is a bunch of seniors in high school ready to graduate. But Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold are ready to take as many lives as humanly possible, waiting to follow through with a plan that they've been working on for over a year.
I was doing Making the Band on MTV. He was doing Punk'd. Yeah. And I gave him a call one day and I said, I heard that you are going to punk me, and I just don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's the way you said it. I'm pretty sure. Oh, well, then you tell the story. I'm pretty sure that's not the way you said it. Okay. I don't think that's a good idea. Is that what you said?
I think that it's about time we have an uncomfortable conversation about Ashton Kutcher and P. Diddy. So if you don't know, Ashton Kutcher and P. Diddy have been best friends for decades. Ashton Kutcher even co-hosted one of Diddy's white parties back in the year 2009. These guys have been very open about how tight of friends they are, even making appearances on TV shows like the show I just showed you as a duo because they were that close of friends. If you didn't know, Ashton Kutcher has spent years campaigning, including in the government, against child sex predators and pedophiles on the internet. So then how does he become best friends with one of the world's most infamous pedophiles? A man who is accused of victimizing dozens of children. Yes, Diddy's adults were not all adults. Many of them were kids. Kids as young as 13, 10 years old. So Diddy never mentioned one thing to Ashton, one of his best friends, about those multi-day sex festivals he held? According to his public persona and actions, this guy should be this guy's worst enemy. These pictures are like Superman hugging a pile of kryptonite. And yet, all you hear is silence. Silence from Ashton Kutcher, silence from Ashton Kutcher's campaign. You're really going to tell me that this guy never mentioned one thing to this guy? Not even when they hosted a white party, which are notorious events in this story? I mean, it's incredibly bizarre and it does not sit right with me. That's all I'll say. If you want to join me on my journey to expose these freaks, listen to my podcast, The Conspiracy File. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or you can watch the video version on YouTube.
Taxi driver secretly took this unsettling final photo of this student. She was then found dead inside a water tank at a motel. Debani Escobar was a beautiful 18-year-old law student. She was adopted by her parents Mario and Dolores. On the night of the 8th of April 2022, she'd been with two friends at a party at an events venue in Mexico. From what I can see online, the place is called the Quinta Diamante and it looks fairly nice but fairly basic. It has a pool and parties were clearly hosted there often. Throughout the night though, guests at the party stated that Debani had actually started behaving really erratically, which was unusual for her. She then ended up in a big argument with one of her friends and locked herself in the men's toilets. By 1:20 a.m, her friends ordered her a Didi, which is basically like an Uber. The male driver collected her and the pair were spotted on CCTV inside of the car arguing. Now the driver was questioned by police and claims that this was because Debani wouldn't tell him where she wanted him to take her to. He said he was asking for her address and she wouldn't give it to him, and he said she then groped him. Now CCTV appears to show that it was actually the other way round. At 4:25 a.m, Debani left the vehicle and the driver sat in the car near to her and took that disturbing photo of her. He then sent this picture to her friend, who he obviously had the number for because they'd booked the taxi for her. Now this was the last photo of Debani alive. CCTV captured her walking towards a motel called the Nueva Castilla Motel, trying to get another taxi but failing. She then seemingly just vanished into thin air. Her dad reported her missing the following day when he failed to hear of her and she failed to return home. A huge search ensued and the taxi driver was questioned by police but never charged with a crime. It wasn't until 13 agonizing days later that there was any news. Unfortunately, it was not good news. Debani's body was found in a water tank at the motel that she'd vanished near to. Her body was badly decomposed due to the water. A government autopsy was conducted and they concluded that she had fallen in, hit her head and drowned. However, her dad was not happy with the ruling. He just felt like this all sounded very suspicious. He had another autopsy done and this one determined that she'd actually suffered and physical abuse prior to her death. Her cause of death was ruled as deep cranial contusion, which is basically bruising to the brain. Following her disappearance and subsequent death, protests were held all around Mexico. People marched the streets holding signs such as "Mexico is a mass grave." Now, Mexico is known for having an unusual and disturbing amount of missing people that some are calling a humanitarian tragedy.
Back in 2019, right, there was an episode of SpongeBob that aired called SpongeBob in Random Land. Basically, what this episode is about is just Mr. Krabs sends SpongeBob and Squidward on a fucking adventure to deliver Krabby Patty to Random Land or whatever. But there's a point in the episode where it shows Squidward trying to run away and he's blocked off by like doors. Like a lot of fucking doors like start appearing in front of him. He opens 3 doors and each one shows like a different version of Squidward. And there's this one version that pops up that is showed, but they ended up taking it down and replacing it. I'm gonna show you what it was.
No way, bro. I think I know what the fuck you're gonna show me.
They aired it for a little bit, but then they ended up replacing it with Squidward baby pooping itself instead of that. And I guess because some audiences, some little kids probably thought it was a little too scary, horrifying and stuff. And you're obviously familiar with the fucking that creepypasta, right?
The episode where Squidward erases himself. What is it called?
Squidward, or the Red Mist, as some people know it. And I did recently see a Red Mist episode on YouTube, which is basically like a retake, because there's like 11 videos out there on YouTube that you could watch, but this was like the best one, so I decided to watch.
I remember this, yo. I literally remember this, bro. It's crazy.
This is Tragedy by the Sea, one of the most disturbing and sad photos of all time. Okay, so first glance at this photo, you just think it's a couple arguing at the beach, right? But believe it or not, this photo might have the most unsettling and disturbing backstory ever. On the morning of April 2nd, 1954, Los Angeles Times photographer named John Gaunt, who is pictured in the middle of this photo, was relaxing on his front yard of his beachfront house when he heard a neighbor shout, "Something's happening on the beach." He then instinctively grabbed his camera and rushed over to see the horrified couple clutching each other on the beach. On the shore stood a young couple named Mr. and Mrs. McDonald, and their body language made John's stomach turn. He realized that someone must be lost, and he then took a photograph from 200 yards away. Only then did he learn that just moments before, the couple's 19-month-old son Michael, who had been playing in the yard, had wandered down to the beach and crawled into the violent waters while they weren't looking. Despite the back and forth efforts by the parents, there was nothing they can do but just wait. Unfortunately, later that day, the child's dead body was washed up about a mile away on the beach. And this photo, titled Tragedy by the Sea, appeared on the front page of the Times the very next day. John Gaunt then won the 1955 Pulitzer Prize Award, calling the photo poignant and profoundly moving. But he also received heavy criticism for capitalizing on the family's tragedy for his photo opportunity. But now take a look at this photo, knowing everything you do, and tell me it's not one of the saddest and most disturbing photos ever.
This is one of the scariest catfishing cases I have ever heard of, and if you have kids that are online, you should listen to this. This is Austin Lee Edwards, a Virginia cop who catfished a 15-year-old girl online before murdering her family and abducting her. Austin posed online as a 17-year-old boy and was trying to sexually extort the 15-year-old girl. But once he asked for a nude photo of her, she stopped all communication with him. On November 25th, Austin drove from Virginia, where he lived, to the girl's home in Riverside, California, and murdered her mom and grandparents before setting the house on fire. He then kidnapped the girl. While trying to flee, Austin died by suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Thankfully, the girl was found physically uninjured, but the trauma she now has to face is horrendous. What's absolutely crazy to me is that prior to this, Austin was a cop with the Virginia State Police. Upon being hired there, he disclosed in his application that in 2016, he voluntarily checked himself into a mental health facility to receive treatment. And without looking into it at all, the Virginia State Police hired him anyway. But what they didn't know was that Austin was completely lying to them. It wasn't voluntary at all. In fact, in 2016, he was actually detained by police under an emergency custody order after threatening to kill himself and his dad. The VSP has since stated that they were not aware of this, but if they were, they would not have hired him. To top it off, Austin had quit the VSP in late October, and right before the murders, he was hired as a deputy with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. And according to them, they contacted the VSP during Austin's hiring process, and they mentioned none of that. Both departments have since stated that there was no indication that Austin would do this. There were so many opportunities for this to possibly have been stopped, but it wasn't. So please be careful and remember this story if you have kids that are online. You just really never know.
This woman murdered her husband to get more YouTube subscribers. On the 20th of February 2015, police got a panicked call from a woman in Texas. A lady named Samantha Walford had called her mum Rosie asking for help. She told her there'd been a kidnapping. What had actually happened was far more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Samantha had met her partner Ernie at a tattoo parlor, and the pair soon began dating. Samantha was already a mother of 2 from a previous relationship. Now, Ernie took on the father figure role for her twins really well. 3 years later, the pair actually had another set of twins. Later down the line, they had another child, so they really had their hands full. Ernie was working loads to provide for the family, and Samantha was trying to make it on YouTube. Her attempt at a YouTube career was actually really putting a strain on her relationship. The pair began arguing loads about her obsession with it and just how it wasn't actually doing very well for the amount of time she was spending on it. She was actually really neglecting her children in order to try and make her channel grow. On the 20th of February 2015, police were called to her home. Samantha claimed that 3 men had broken in and kidnapped her husband Ernie. However, inconsistencies started appearing from the get-go. During an interrogation, she admitted to calling her mum but didn't call 911 because she was tied up. Police asked, "How did you dial your mother, with your face?" She eventually admitted to knowing the kidnappers but still denied having anything to do with it. They were Jose Ponce, Jonathan Sandford, and Octavius Rhymes. Investigators seized phones and ended up uncovering texts between Samantha and the men, and the texts were shocking. They proved that Samantha had orchestrated the whole thing. Now, really similar to the Jennifer Pan case that I recently covered, Samantha had left the front door open intentionally to allow the men to access the house. They kidnapped Ernie and took him to the woods out of earshot, where they callously shot and killed him. Police concluded that Samantha was the mastermind and concocted the plan to get fame and attention. 2 of the men got 50-year sentences, 1 got 93 years, and Samantha got 99 years.
This pedophile has been connected to multiple serial killers and was the ringleader of one of the biggest pedophile rings in American history. Now, that's a loaded statement, but I do want to warn you, viewer discretion is advised going forward. So this is John David Norman. He was born in 1927, and between 1960 and 1998, he was convicted multiple times on charges of assaulting children and producing CP. But John David Norman wasn't your average pedophile. He was a businessman. And in fact, he started up and operated multiple CP production and distribution rings across the US. These rings included the Odyssey Foundation based in Dallas, which mailed CP to consumers, the Delta Project, which did the same thing in Illinois, Handy Andy from Pennsylvania. I mean, the list goes on and on. This guy was the sickest type of individual. Throughout his life, John David Norman went by at least 20 different aliases. But here's where things get disturbing. So John David Norman was arrested by the police multiple times on CP production and distribution charges, and on charges related to him assaulting kids. And when he was arrested, he was found in possession of a Rolodex, which was basically a storage container for index cards. And each of these Rolodexes had 30,000 cards in them, with the names of at least 50 to 100,000 clients in the US. These clients of his included politicians, famous musicians, celebrities, and everyday people from everyday communities. But every single time after John David Norman was arrested and the police gained access to this Rolodex, it went missing. This not only happened once, but it happened multiple times. So obviously authorities were in on this whole operation and they were helping him keep it going. I mean, how do you lose track multiple times of an object that could give you leads on 50 to 100,000 pedophiles? Well, you lose track of it if there are people on there that you don't want investigated. But here's where things get disturbing. John David Norman has been linked to a number of famous serial killers, one of them being Dean Corll, the Candyman in Houston, Texas, who victimized, tortured, and murdered at least 30 young boys. He has been directly tied to John David Norman through the Odyssey Foundation, and obviously there is a darker connection there that we can explore in another TikTok. But one of John David Norman's employees was a guy named Philip Paskey. While John David Norman was in prison in Illinois, Philip Paskey helped him run his CP operation from behind prison bars. But eventually, Philip Paskey got out of prison, and guess who he started working for? That's right, John Wayne Gacy. That's right, Philip Paskey worked for John Wayne Gacy. Philip Paskey was one of the boys who helped Gacy all the time. He was in the crawl space. And if you don't know, John Wayne Gacy murdered 33 young boys. Now, I obviously don't think John Wayne Gacy worked alone. There's actually data that shows that he was out of town at certain times during the murder spree, and the same can be said about Dean Corll. I mean, there are a lot of inconsistencies in these stories. But time and time again, John David Norman was allowed to go free. They would let him out on parole, then he would escape, he would start up another CP ring, he'd be arrested, he'd be let out on parole, he'd escape again. But he was eventually arrested and put into prison in California in 1998. But they just couldn't keep him there, and eventually they released him to a rural town. He was on parole, and he then violated the terms of his parole by giving a note to a 19-year-old grocery store bagger, giving him his contact information. He was then ordered back into state custody in 2009, and he died in 2011, thus taking all of his horrific secrets with him to the grave. Now, there is so much more to this story that I couldn't even begin to cover in one TikTok, so if you guys want me to dive deeper into this, I totally can. Let me know in the comments. This is a subject that has fascinated me for years. And this is something that nobody really knows about or talks about. We recently investigated a ring just like this being run in Michigan, and I produced an entire documentary about it. So if you want to help me spread awareness about these sorts of things and how they've happened and continue to happen, definitely go check out this documentary on YouTube. It got demonetized, but I'm not trying to make money off of this. I'm trying to spread awareness, so it doesn't matter to me. I just want people to see this information and learn it so they can understand that these things have happened and continue to happen.
So this is the case of Laura. Basically what happened with her is that one day her family and friends reported her missing. Well, specifically the people from the school she worked at.
Was she a staff or was she a teacher?
She was a teacher.
Oh, okay.
And she didn't report to the first day of school. So people were kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Somebody went to go knock on her door. Nobody was answering.
Yeah.
It was a little more concerning as well because of the fact that she was 4 months pregnant. So then her friends and family started getting concerned. So then they called and messaged her boyfriend. Supposedly he was the last one to be with her. Nobody else was with her. Nobody else had no type of connection with her between that times other than obviously her fucking boyfriend. There was these messages that Laura had texted her sister saying that my boyfriend is taking me on a little adventure. I just don't know where we are, but we're in the middle of a field. And she's like, send me a picture. And she ends up sending her a picture of like a random ass field. So they set up a whole like
team operation.
Yeah. Because you have to talk on the news, try to reach out to anybody who's holding her hostage or some shit, or just like a message to her. And he's just saying like, hey Laura, we're looking for you. Anything that we went through, we could solve this and shit together. Then they find a body, and she was buried, bro. It was literally like a fucking, just imagine mad grass, bro,
and then one dirt patch.
Reason why that happened, why they're saying that he murdered her, was because he had a fiance and he was like, she's pregnant, I don't want her to ruin any type of thing that I got going on over here, so I gotta get rid of her. And the whole reason why I saw this is because Sam and Colby and stuff, you know we love Sam and Colby and shit.
Fucking love Sam and Colby, yeah.
And there was a viral clip saying that they actually witnessed the murder.
Somebody is screaming. Someone's screaming bloody murder. Guys, what the you hear that? Yeah, get out of here.
So they're saying that that video right there is them witnessing literally that murder because the time frame matches, the place matches, and they were kind of around the same area. But the reason why I disagree with that is because in that video you can see a helicopter and you can hear the cops. And there was no gunshot. And how she died was a gunshot to the back of her head, bro.
This disturbing story that I'm about to explain might make you never use Tinder ever again. In November 2017, the woman you see right here, whose name is Cindy Loof, was swiping aimlessly on Tinder until she matched with a woman named Audrey. The two agreed to meet on their first date on the night of November 14th. Everything was perfect, and Sydney even took this picture before she went on the date saying, "Ready for my date." On their date, they shared life stories and a bunch of laughs. But things took a turn for the worse at the second date when Audrey asked Sydney to go into her apartment. And as a result, Sydney never returned home. Sydney's family knew something was wrong when she didn't text them for 4 days and her pet cat wasn't fed. So as a result of all this happening, they immediately called the police. Unfortunately, a couple days later, Sydney Loof's body was found. Her body was brought to the morgue in 6 different garbage bags because she had been cut into 14 pieces while a part of her upper left arm was never found. After police investigation, the police found it very odd that 51-year-old Aubrey Trail and 25-year-old Bailey Boswell posted videos on Facebook claiming their innocence when the police were never even questioning them. It turns out that this couple is using the pseudonym Audrey on Tinder to lure Sydney into their apartment and recruit her into a cult. And the only reason Aubrey Trail dismembered Sydney's body and removed her organs was because he panicked after she accidentally passed out during a sexual fantasy. Aubrey Trail was convicted of first-degree murder and Bailey Boswell was facing first-degree murder. And this picture right here is the last known image of Sydney Loof before she was brutally murdered by her Tinder date. Or in this case, she thought it was her Tinder date. All in all, this case is extremely disturbing, and rest in peace to Sydney Loof. It also goes to show that you have to be careful when you go on dates with strangers. You never truly know who somebody really is in this disturbing world.
This is the horrifying moment right before this journalist was shot dead on live TV. Alison Parker was a budding young journalist from Martinsville in Virginia. She graduated from James Madison University and in 2014 started working on air for WDBJ7's morning show. It was the early hours of the 26th of August 2015 when Alison and her cameraman, 27-year-old Adam Ward, were preparing for a broadcast. The pair worked together quite often, so they were used to doing this. Alison had just celebrated her 24th birthday and was getting back into the swing of work. They had no idea it was the last broadcast they would ever do. They were due to be covering a segment on the 50th anniversary of the Smith Mountain Lake. They were interviewing a woman called Vicky Gardner about this. In the middle of the live interview, though, something absolutely horrific would unfold. It was 6:45 a.m. and the interview was underway, being watched by many viewers back at home. During the live broadcast, terrifyingly, a man in black began to approach the women. He was holding a gun. Suddenly, he fired out of nowhere at defenseless Allison. He then turned the weapon onto Adam, the blindsided cameraman. He then also fired shots at Vicky Gardner, who was being interviewed. Now, she was injured, but actually decided to curl up in a ball on the floor and play dead in a desperate bid to avoid further attack. Terrifyingly, the cameras were still rolling as this was unfolding, and it was being broadcast to many people at home. Horrified viewers watched as Allison and Adam lay dead on the floor. The gunman fled, and the cameras were cut by the control room, and the live feed ended. It cut back to stunned journalists in the studio. Now, Kimberly McBroom, who was working in the news studio that day, stated later that she was really confused by what had just happened. She heard the shots but didn't know if it was just like a car backfiring. Police raced to the scene and found Adam and Allison deceased. Vicky was rushed to hospital and thankfully survived her gunshot wound. Now the police knew the hunt was on to find out who on earth had committed this crime and what was their motive. That's when other journalists at the news station told officers that they thought that they'd recognized the killer. They also had an idea of the motive. Now, they told police that the shooter could very well have been a man named Vesta Flanagan. He had actually worked for the news station fairly recently and was sacked for making staff feel uncomfortable. Vesta had a history of being sacked from jobs due to bizarre behaviour and also threatening his colleagues. It transpired that Vesta had meticulously planned the shooting in great detail. Shortly after the killings, Vesta posted on his social media a confession. Not only this, he also posted videos of the horrific crime that he'd taken to his Facebook account. Police were on a desperate hunt to try and track him down before he took any further victims. They knew it was a race against the clock. However, before they could get to him, Vesta crashed the vehicle that he was driving and unalived himself via gunshots.
I tell you that this is the most disturbing missing persons case, I 100% mean it. Because you don't just go missing after jet skiing with a creepy man that you just met on vacation. Max DeVries was 14 years old when he went missing while on vacation with his family in Aruba back in 2004. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are bizarre, and nothing has disturbed me more than learning about what happened to him, so let's talk about it. Part of the reason why this story is so horrifying is because in 2002, just 2 years before Max would vanish, his dad would suddenly die after having a heart attack. This would leave Max's mom to raise their 2 children alone, which is already devastating enough. But fast forward to May 12th of 2004. The DeVries family, which now consisted of Yvonne, her 14-year-old son Max, and his younger sister Dominique, were simply just trying to put their lives back together. They decided to plan a fun family vacation to Aruba to take their mind off of things and altogether heal. They all stayed at the La Cabana Resort, and they were so excited to hang out on the beach and play in the water. Growing up, they had a sailboat, so Max specifically loved the water and knew how to swim really well. A few days into their arrival, Max was playing pool at the resort when, seemingly out of nowhere, a man in his 30s approached him. To avoid being sued, I'm not going to give his full name, but the man's first name is David. So David starts playing pool with Max, and at first it seemed a little weird to Yvonne how friendly he was with him. But then again, it was a resort where everyone was pretty friendly, so it wasn't really a cause for concern. The man then started telling Max and the family about how he was also on vacation with his adoptive father, and they were celebrating the day that he was adopted so many years ago as a kid. The adoptive father is also named David, so from here on out, I'll address them as David Jr. and David Sr. So David Sr. then joins everyone and asks them what they had planned for the next day. Yvonne tells him that she and her family are going parasailing, and David Sr. asks if they can join them. So Yvonne, being nice, says yes. The next day came and went, and everyone had a good time together. They all went parasailing, and then David Jr. takes Max out on a couple of rented jet skis. They came back and Max said that he had fun, and that was that. They weren't really planning on hanging out with the two men again, but then the next day, as the family was hanging out by the pool, David Sr. approached them. He then asked Max in front of Yvonne if he wants to go jet skiing again. Yvonne tells him no because he just did it the day prior, but he insists, saying that he really wants Max to go and that he'd even pay for it. And Max, being a kid, was really excited and begged his mom to let him go. So Yvonne said yes, even though she really didn't want him to. The last time Max was ever seen alive was getting on a jet ski and following David Sr. out onto the water. And what happened after this has never really been explained. So the jet ski rental was only supposed to last 45 minutes, but over an hour goes by and Max and David Sr. are still not back yet. So Yvonne starts to worry and heads down to the beach, but to her surprise, there were already people trying to look for the two with binoculars. This is when things start to get strange. In a panic, Yvonne goes back to the resort and tells management that her son is missing, and he was last seen with this strange older man that's also staying at this resort. So management then goes to the men's room and starts knocking on the door in hopes of finding David Jr. inside, but nobody answers the door. So authorities were notified and a search and rescue boat was sent out to try and find them. In the distance, Yvonne could see the boat coming back, but mysteriously, only one person was brought back, and it was David Sr. Max was nowhere to be found. What's odd is that the entire time they were looking for the two, David Jr. was mysteriously missing as well, and he only showed back up when his dad was being rescued and brought back to shore. When Yvonne asked him where he was because they were looking for him, he said that he was passed out drunk in his room and didn't hear anyone knocking. When David Sr. was brought back to shore, he was suspiciously covered in scratches all over his neck and arms. And when asked about what happened, his answer was truly disturbing. David Sr. said that he and Max went out to a sandbar a few miles away and decided to get off their jet skis. When they tried to leave, their jet skis wouldn't turn back on, so Max tied them together so they wouldn't float away. But as he was doing this, he said that he heard a loud thump, and when he looked around, he saw Max floating away. He said that that was the last time he ever saw Max, and he didn't try to help him or anything. Because of the scratches all over his body, the Aruban police brought him in for questioning, and his story started to not add up. David Sr. first told police that Max let go of the jet skis and started swimming to shore, but he then changed his story entirely. He then said that when he saw Max for the last time, he was just very calmly floating away, like he didn't even try to swim. David Sr. said that he tried calling out to Max, but he wasn't responding, although he said that his eyes were open. It was very obvious that he was lying and hiding something, so Yvonne asked authorities if they could check under his fingernails to see if they could find any DNA, or to possibly give him a lie detector test. But Aruban police told her no, that this isn't America and that they don't do stuff like that. When asked about how he got those scratches, David Sr. said that he got them from trying to climb back on the jet ski. But this doesn't really make sense because this wasn't his first time riding on a jet ski. He had done it before, and his entire neck and both of his arms were literally covered in scratches. That doesn't just happen by simply trying to get back on a jet ski. Even though this man was clearly hiding something, the police just let him go and pretty much believed every word he said. Although a massive search was launched by boat and air, Max was never found. Authorities said that Max was lost at sea and that this was all just a tragic accident, and they eventually stopped searching for him. There really wasn't much that Yvonne could do as authorities weren't helping her, so she and her daughter had to go back home without Max. One thing that really stood out to me though is that on the flight home, the two men were actually sitting behind Yvonne, and David Sr. said something that's honestly really sinister. He asked Yvonne if he could send her flowers on Max's anniversary. Who would say something like that? After this, Yvonne never saw those two men ever again. After going home, Yvonne did everything she could to try and get media attention for Max's disappearance, but this was quickly overshadowed by the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, who also went missing in Aruba just a year after Max, and news of her disappearance was everywhere. Like, you couldn't turn on a TV without hearing about it. Not too long after this, a local police detective near Yvonne's home in Michigan decided to take on Max's case. It didn't take him long while researching Max's story to immediately figure out that something horrible happened to him and that this wasn't just an accident. He started reviewing the statements given by David Sr. in Aruba and noticed how his story didn't add up. So he decided to run a background check on him, and what he found is horrifying. He found that David Sr. was arrested in 1981 for sexually abusing another 14-year-old boy, the same age as Max. But this wasn't just any random 14-year-old boy. It was his own adoptive son, David Jr., who was the one traveling with him in Aruba. This was a major red flag to the detective because if he was arrested for assaulting his son, why were they now still in contact and traveling together? So then he started going through David Jr.'s statements that he gave in Aruba, and he found that he lied about something major. He said that his dad had never been arrested, which obviously wasn't true because he had been a personal victim of his own dad, and he was arrested for it. Then he started oversharing a bunch of really odd information, saying how he's 100% hetero and has never done anything intimate with a boy or man. This was all voluntarily said by him, which is weird. This detective got the FBI to briefly investigate this case, and they actually brought David Jr. in for questioning. He of course denied having anything bad to do with Max's disappearance, and he stood on the fact that it was just a tragic accident. So the FBI offered him to take a polygraph test, in which he agreed, and he was scheduled to take it the following day. But not so shockingly, he never showed up. Eventually, the FBI were taken off the case to work on a bigger case, but they believed that the two men were working together to target other young boys. They believed that David Jr. was used to groom Max into creating a friendship bond, and then when David Sr. took Max out to the sandbar, he had a son meet him out there so that they could assault Max and kill him. And that's why David Sr. was covered in scratches, because Max fought for his life. Despite how obvious it was that Max was met with foul play, his case would soon go cold, and no movement would happen until April of 2016. One day, seemingly out of the blue, Yvonne gets a message from a woman asking to talk about Max. This woman doesn't want to be named publicly for fear of her safety, but she goes on to tell Yvonne that she dated David Jr. for a year. She said that she, David Jr., and his dad were all sitting in the living room when his dad suddenly blurted out, quote, "Hey, has he ever mentioned anything about the 14-year-old boy who went missing in Aruba?" End quote. The woman says no because David Jr. has never mentioned anything about it before, and his dad says that he was really close with the boy and that it hurt him a lot when he went missing. Later that night, the woman asked David Jr. what happened that day in Aruba, which made him incredibly mad. He yelled at her to never talk about him ever again. Apparently at this time, this woman had a son from a previous relationship, and she said that after this interaction, she started paying attention to how David Sr. would act around her son. She said that he got way too close to her son and always wanted him to sit on his lap. So this is when she left him, and she decided to Google missing 14-year-old boy in Aruba and found Max's story. She then reached out to Yvonne wanting to help. This is when Yvonne found yet another girl that this man dated, and she was able to talk to her as well. This woman said that on one occasion, David Jr. told her that the only good thing his father has ever done for him was get him out of trouble in Aruba. She said that David Jr. would sleep talk and say Max's name, and one night she confronted him about it, asking who Max was. He then snapped and held her at gunpoint, strangling and stabbing her, but somehow the woman was able to escape and survive the attack. David Jr. was arrested for this, but somehow he only ever got 2 years probation for literal attempted murder. It's now been 20 years, and Max has never been found. The two men have never been charged in connection to his case. Although the way I see it is that there are two people in this entire world who know exactly what happened to him. Max's mom is here on TikTok trying to get some focus back on his case, so please go follow her. Although what exactly happened to him 20 years ago remains a mystery, Max still deserves justice, and his case deserves to be reopened.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is why you should always lock your doors. Two teenage girls were working the night shift at a Pizza Hut when they realized it was 11 o'clock, meaning that it was time to close up shop. They turned off the lights, locked the doors, and began to walk outside. But as they approached their car, they realized that there was an old lady sitting in the front passenger seat. One of the girls opened the driver's side door and asked the old woman, "Can I help you?" before getting in. To which she replied, "I just need a ride home." The girls then told her that they needed to go back inside to call their moms and tell them that they'd be late. They immediately ran back inside, locked the doors, and proceeded to call the police, who showed up about 10 minutes later and arrested her. As it turns out, it was actually a 47-year-old man dressed up like an old woman, and the police found drugs and a knife on his body.
housing on base. But there's one bedroom in the naval housing unit that Jack gets a really bad feeling from. He says it always feels like someone's in the room looking at him. So he just keeps the door closed, doesn't go in it, but then eventually he gets married and needs a bigger bedroom and has to move into this room. And weird stuff immediately starts happening. The closet starts opening by itself at night. Furniture starts moving around when he's not looking. But here's the craziest part. Jack's story isn't unique. When he starts talking to a bunch of other people in the Navy about his experience, it turns out a lot of them also feel like their homes are haunted. After some digging, I actually found out that this Navy base was built on Gunjawamp, a haunted swamp in Connecticut. I do a whole deep dive on it in my podcast, but there's something weird going on there.
Why are women so attracted to serial killers? Ted Bundy, Richard Ramirez, Charles Manson. These men have a lot in common. High cheekbones, strong jawlines, and symmetrical faces, but most importantly, they have murdered a combined 58 people that we know of. The more surprising reality is that when these men were convicted of these crimes, they received countless fan mail from female admirers. They would actually send them nude photographs, love letters, and would completely thirst over a guy that would eat them for dinner. Now, some claim women desire these men because they're the ultimate bad boy, and the woman can nurture him back to good. They think, oh, he would never kill me, and then they turn into the next victim. Others, such as Joe Rogan in his podcast, believe that this comes from an evolutionary benefit to become close to killers. Because back in the day, murder was pretty common. So of course a girl would want to be with a guy who could prevent that. But ultimately, the question remains.
I escaped after 14 years in captivity where I suffered physical, mental, and sexual abuse. I am Yekaterina, and this is my story of liberation. When I was 19, I met a 37-year-old man named Vladimir Cheskadov at a train station. I was with my friend Oksana. He appeared to be a very nice person and we became friends. He invited us to his house for drinks. We could not refuse and went with him. I did not know that there would begin a nightmare that would last 14 years. As soon as we entered, he threatened us and locked us in different rooms. During the time I was in his basement, he only came in to abuse me, and he only released me to clean, cook, and take care of his mother. A year later, he murdered my friend and forced me to help him get rid of her body. One day, Vladimir was very intoxicated and forgot to lock my door. Later, I heard an ambulance at home and I knew it was because of Vladimir's condition. It was my only chance to escape, so I ran out until I found my sister. Finally, I was free. The nightmare was over, although these 14 years will always remain engraved in my mind.
This is the most disturbing and unsettling thing you will ever watch. This is called The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, and it's the most disturbing short film ever. It's written and directed by Ari Aster, who did Hereditary and Midsommar, and we all know how scary and messed up those movies are. The film follows the Johnson family, who is just a normal suburban family, but as the film goes on, a shocking secret is revealed, and this secret will make you sick to your stomach. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I remember my first time watching this, and I couldn't stop saying, what the hell is going on? This film just has such an unsettling vibe to it, and it'll make you feel so uneasy. You can watch the whole film on YouTube right now, and it's only around 29 minutes. But don't let the short time fool you. This film is absolutely disturbing. After you watch The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, come back to this video and let me know your thoughts on it. This is completely disturbing and messed up, and not everyone can finish it. And you will find out extremely quickly when you start watching it. And a word of advice, whatever you do, never watch this with your parents.
After this woman told her friends that her ex was threatening to kill her, she vanished. Ebony Duncan from Missouri vanished in September. The 44-year-old woman was reported missing on the 7th of September after failing to show up at work. CCTV footage captured her the day prior to her going missing, leaving in a silver car which pulled up behind her after she finished work at around 6:11 p.m. Worryingly, she had told one of her co-workers that her ex-boyfriend was threatening to kill her, and the man in question is identified as Charles Smith Howell. Charles is actually already in police custody after being arrested on charges of illegally possessing ammunition. He's due in court on the 8th of January. He does actually already have a criminal history with convictions relating to substances, robbery, and weapons. The car that picked Ebony up on the day in question is believed to be owned by Charles's girlfriend. Shockingly, it's been reported that police may have found Ebony's body. This came after police dogs located a deceased person in the woods of Kansas City. Police are requesting help from the public in locating the person of interest, Kiera Ransberg, as they require her for questioning.
This woman murdered her boyfriend for $30 million. 47-year-old Ina Canoyer poisoned her boyfriend, 51-year-old Stephen Riley, after she found out that he inherited $30 million. Unfortunately for Ina, Stephen was never going to receive any money. This all started when Stephen received an email from an anonymous person who claimed to be his distant relative and offered him $30 million for absolutely no reason. Stephen believed that this was real and arranged a time to meet with this person to sign off on the cash. And on September 3rd, Stephen and Ina went to the airport where this person was supposed to meet them, but they never showed up. Now, this is where things take a turn. Before going to the airport, Ina made sure that Stephen drank a cup of tea that she had made him, which was poisoned with antifreeze. It did not take long for Stephen to feel extremely sick, and while others tried to take him to the hospital, Ina said that he just had a heat stroke and he should just go home. Ina waited until the next day to call paramedics, and at this point, Stephen was already deceased. According to their close friends, Stephen was planning to leave Ina when he received the money and share all the money with his kids. But she wasn't gonna let that happen. She believed she had rights to his money as his common law wife. Unfortunately for Ina, there was never any money, so she did this all for no reason, and now she faces up to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
An arrest was made on Halloween this year relating to a Halloween cold case murder from 4 decades ago. In the early hours of Halloween 1982, Clifford Smith was murdered. The 24-year-old man was shot in the head and his body was dumped by the White River in Indiana. His worried wife had reported him missing to police, and there was no news for an agonizing month. It was then that animal trappers came across the victim's body on the 1st of December. However, frustratingly, the case went cold and Clifford's family went without any closure or justice for over 4 decades. Thankfully, this Halloween, 41 years exactly since the tragic killing, a man was arrested. 61-year-old Ronald Anderson was detained by police, and police state he will be held in jail until he appears in court. Police believe that Ronald was actually at the same gathering as Clifford on the night in question. They apparently both left together in the early hours of the morning. Police believe that Ronald took a shotgun with him from the house when he left. It's believed that he dumped the weapon back at the house and also went back to the victim's body to hide evidence a couple of days later. Interestingly, although usually with these cold cases, it actually wasn't new technology that has helped crack this case. Investigators have stated that it was simply a case of re-interviewing and also re-examining old evidence that they had.
This woman's boyfriend found CP images on her phone, and the images were of his own daughter. So meet Ashley Cheatham. She's from Oklahoma, and she was just arrested last week after her boyfriend went through her phone and found one of the most disturbing things you can imagine. So initially, her boyfriend thought that Ashley might be cheating on him or doing something weird on the internet. So he decided to go through her phone and make sure she wasn't messaging other dudes. But when he went through her camera roll, he found disturbing, graphic photos of his own daughter in compromising positions being abused by Ashley. Now, immediately Ashley's boyfriend went into the police department and he was basically begging for a police officer to talk to him immediately so that he could report this behavior to the authorities. And after hearing the story and seeing the evidence, authorities went in immediately to go arrest Ashley. And now she's been charged with a number of felonies, including the essay of a child under the age of 12, the making and distributing of obscene material or CP, and some other drug charges. But this story still gets more disturbing if that's even possible. So while authorities were doing a background check on her after her arrest, they found out that Ashley was in the process of applying to work at a local elementary school. And according to some reports, she actually was posting online looking for churches that needed volunteers or workers to help work with the children. So needless to say, I don't know and I don't want to know exactly what she was planning, but this woman adamantly wanted access to children and she was determined to get that access. Sadly, her boyfriend's 3-year-old daughter was the victim and hopefully the only victim that we're going to find out of Ashley's. But yeah, this once again just goes to show that you cannot trust anybody, really. I mean, she's only 19 years old and she's already engaged herself in the most despicable crime you can possibly commit. So, good luck in prison, have fun, we won't miss you, Ashley. Davi Vanity from Blood on the Dance Floor is allegedly one of the worst pedophiles in the music industry.
And to this day, he really has yet to face any real repercussions for his actions. So Blood on the Dance Floor, if you don't know, was a huge electronic, alternative, emo, whatever you want to call them, band from the 2000s, 2010s. And I remember them being huge in the scene. I used to drum in a metalcore band, and I had a lot of friends that were fans of these guys. But ever since the year 2009, at least 21 different women have made a series of disturbing charges against Davi. These charges include SA, pedophilia, all of that. So 2 former band members, Gary Ecstasy and Jay Von Monroe, both left the band and said that Davi was a sexual predator. They got interviewed by people, they claimed that he was a very dangerous person. And Jay Von Monroe actually claimed that Davi forced him to tour without his HIV medication, which almost made him contract AIDS. Even people like Jeffree Star witnessed Davi behaving inappropriately with minors while they were on tour with him. And yeah, most of the accusers against Davi were underage at the time that he allegedly assaulted them. So as early as 2007, allegations against Davi exist. This all really started when a 14-year-old named Diana called into a radio show and claimed that she had been assaulted by Davi. The police came to her house the next day and she told them that she had connected with Davi on MySpace. He had offered to come dye her hair, he had driven across the state to be with her, and when her mother had left to go work her shift at night, Davi had made her perform oral on him. So disturbingly, after the police heard this, they actually made contact with Davi. And they told him that if he didn't have any further contact with the girl, the mom did not want him to be arrested. And so he told the officers, "I'm sorry, I didn't know she was so young," and they completely let him off the hook. He was never charged with a crime, even though this would be considered statutory rape, and he could be punished to 15 years in prison just for that offense alone. But yeah, like I said, over the years, 20 plus women have come forward and stated that Davi assaulted them when they were underage. Other people that knew him said they saw him doing these things. And yet the police have never taken any form of action against this guy. You know you're a shitbag when even the guy from Insane Clown Posse, Violent J, threatens to beat the shit out of you if he ever sees you. So every time he's confronted with all of this, Davi completely denies it. He says it never happened. He evades the question. And in recent years, Blood on the Dance Floor's music has been removed from services like Spotify and Google Play. In 2020, it should be noted that Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator launched an investigation into Davi. He interviewed people who were affected by him, who were assaulted by him. And currently, I'm saying currently as of today, the FBI states that they are actively investigating him for crimes committed in the past against minors. So let's all cross our fingers and collectively hope that finally Davi Vanity can be stopped and he can face some sort of repercussion for the horrible things that he's done.
This is the Baby Brianna case, one of the most horrendous cases ever explained. The Baby Brianna case is one of the most gut-turning cases you will ever hear about. Baby Brianna wouldn't live past 5 months old thanks to her mother, father, and uncle. On July 19, 2002, Stephanie Lopez, Baby Brianna's mother, made a 911 call stating that her 5-month-old baby wasn't breathing. They then rushed Baby Brianna to the hospital where they were unsuccessful at trying to bring her back, and she was pronounced dead. And once the autopsy was made public, the residents of the New Mexico town understood this just wasn't a terrible accident, but instead intentional. The autopsy revealed that Baby Brianna endured more physical beatings than any human should have to experience in their lifetime. And she was only 5 months old. It was announced and ruled that Baby Brianna died from craniocerebral injuries. She had visible bruisings and scabbing all over her forehead and head. Along with the scabbing and bruising, Baby Brianna also had 2 skull fractures that were several days old. Baby Brianna also had signs of human bite marks, not just a few human bite marks, multiple, as in 15. She had 2 rib fractures that were 2 weeks old. She had been violently shaken at least twice in her lifetime due to her optical nerves being filled with new and old blood. She suffered bucket handle fractures caused by her legs and arms being violently forced, yanked, or pulled in different directions, and even out of their socket. Along with these fractures and head injuries, Baby Brianna also had injuries consisting with sexual assault. According to Baby Brianna's mother, Stephanie Lopez, and the father, Andrew Walters, the night of July 18th went something like this, and this was the last night Baby Brianna was alive. Andrew got off work and went home to play video games. He played video games and drank beer with some other family members until 12:30 a.m. and he went to bed. He then said Stephanie got up around 7 a.m. and found Brianna unresponsive, prompting them to call 911. However, after more questioning, Andrew started to crack in his interrogation and suddenly he revealed the truth. Andrew admitted to biting his 5-month-old daughter and was able to identify the bite marks that he made. He stated that he was playing a little roughly with baby Brianna. He also mentioned that he and baby Brianna's uncle, Stephen Lopez, were throwing baby Brianna up in the air and not catching her, letting her hit the ground extremely hard. They even threw her up at the ceiling, smacking her head against it. Stephen Lopez, baby Brianna's uncle, admitted to drinking several beers that night. He stated he didn't remember starting sexual activity with his 5-month-old niece, but he said he stopped himself from committing a sex act because he knew it was wrong. These fatal injuries are what cost baby Brianna her life at just 5 months old. Andrew Walters, baby Brianna's father, was sentenced to 57 years in prison. Stephen Lopez, baby Brianna's uncle, was sentenced to 51 years in prison. And lastly, Stephanie Lopez, baby Brianna's mother, was sentenced to 27 years in prison. However, due to good behavior, she was released on parole early, which is just insane. Nobody that does something this horrific should ever get out of prison or stay alive. This case really rubs me the wrong way because baby Brianna was only 5 months old, not even experiencing 1 year of life. This is one of those cases where after you read it and research it, your day just feels weird. I hope these parents burn in hell, and may baby Brianna rest in peace.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
This girl was kept in a box and used as a sex slave for 7 years. 20-year-old Colleen Stan is an American woman who was kidnapped and held as a sex slave by Cameron and Janice Hooker in their California home for over 7 years between 1977 and 1984. Her case has received international fame and has been a subject of many books, films, and television series. On May 19, 1977, Colleen Stan was hitchhiking from her home in Eugene, Oregon, to a friend's home in Northern California where she was heading to a birthday party. Cameron Hooker kidnapped 20-year-old Colleen after picking her up. Colleen said she was a very experienced hitchhiker and had allowed 2 rides to go past her before accepting the ride with Cameron Hooker. Colleen said she felt confident climbing into the blue van because Hooker's wife Janice and their baby were in the car. They then stopped at a gas station along the way and Colleen went to use the restroom. And she said a voice told her to run out and jump out the window and never look back, but she never did, which she definitely regrets. When they left, they got on the highway and Cameron Hooker pulled over on the side of the road and put a knife to Colleen's throat, all the way until they got to an isolated area. She was then locked in a wooden box that was designed to prevent light, sound, and fresh air entering. After this, Colleen was tortured and kept locked in the box for 23 hours a day until she was given a contract and forced to sign herself into slavery for life in January 1978. Her kidnapper also said that they were being watched by a powerful organization called the Company, and if she ever tried to escape, they would torture her and harm her family. Colleen then became a slave and her new name was Kay, and she was forced to call Cameron master. Cameron then started raping Colleen, and it was mostly consisting of oral rape. Cameron reportedly didn't want to have normal sex with Colleen because he considered that to breach his agreement with his wife. Instead, he raped her with objects. To avoid painful punishments, Colleen tried to comply with Cameron's commandments, which later led to her being allowed to go out to jog and work in the yard, and even help him with bigger stuff like an underground dungeon for more slaves. Even with an open door, neighbors, and a telephone, she never made an attempt to escape because her fear of the Company kept her from seeking help. Additionally, Stan was also allowed to visit her family by herself in 1981, but did not reveal her situation due to her fear of the possible consequences from the Company. Her family thought she was involved in some sort of cult, and they did not want to pressure her to stay in fear that she would stay away forever. The next day, Colleen returned for a second visit with Cameron posing as her boyfriend. Cameron feared that he had given his slave too much freedom and took her back to his home, where he locked her in the wooden box under his waterbed. She remained in the box 23 hours a day for the next 3 years. Colleen would go to the bathroom using a bed pen which she positioned under herself with her feet. Once Cameron's children had gone to bed, he would take Colleen out of the box and feed her and torture her. Colleen was not allowed to make any noise and she had to stay still for 23 hours a day in the complete dark, with little to no air to breathe. In the summer, the box would get over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In 1983, Colleen was allowed to get a job as a maid at a hotel, and Cameron wanted her to become his second wife, which was a turning point for Janice, who is his wife. And in August 1984, Janice began struggling with herself and went to Colleen. She then told her that Cameron was not part of the company and the company wasn't even real. Janice then helped Colleen escape to a bus station where they had Colleen's parents help bring her home. Colleen Stan is still alive today, and she experiences PTSD and has extreme back and shoulder injuries, which is from being trapped in a small box for 7 years straight. This case is extremely gut-turning, and could you ever imagine this happening to you? Luckily, Cameron Hooker was found guilty of kidnapping and sexual assault and was sentenced to 104 years in prison.
This true crime case is a horrific warning to be very careful with who you're friends with at school. Christine Paulila from Long Island was diagnosed with alopecia and poor vision from an early age. Upsettingly, she was bullied at school regularly due to her appearance. She would wear thick glasses to help with her sight and wigs due to her hair loss. Children would be very cruel to her and run up behind her and snatch her wig off, leaving her humiliated. She would desperately try to do her makeup to look as nice as possible and would draw on her eyebrows to try and fit in. Then while attending high school in Euston, she made friends with some of the popular girls. These girls were Rachel Colorutis and Tiffany Rowell. The pair really supported Christine and helped her with improving her makeup skills to look even better. She was eventually named the school's Miss Irresistible in 2000. She was a far cry from the shy and insecure child she once was. Due to her newfound confidence, she started to date and she got a boyfriend. 17-year-old Christine started dating 21-year-old Christopher Snyder. Unfortunately, he was a known criminal and used to do substances, so understandably, Christine's friends and parents disapproved. Christine would end up using substances too while they were dating. The couple started having some quite shocking arguments, and one of them even resulted in Christine spending the night on Christopher's parents' front garden and threatening to kill them all. On the 18th of July 2003, the couple visited Tiffany's house. They had a sinister plan. Now, Tiffany lived in Clear Lake City and she was hanging out with her own boyfriend and his cousin Aldebert and Rachel. The friends' nice evening would begin to take a very dark turn. Christine and her boyfriend had planned to go to Tiffany's house to steal substances and then leave. Upon arrival, though, the pair started to have another argument. Shockingly, the two of them began shooting. It's reported that they fired at least 40 times. The 4 innocent victims all received multiple gunshot wounds and 3 were deceased. At this point, though, Rachel was alive. The poor girl mustered up some strength amongst all of the chaos and crawled through a puddle of her own blood. She was desperately trying to reach a phone to call for help. However, Christine spotted her and started beating her over the head with a weapon. As Rachel was dying, she called out, "Why?" Sadly, one of the victims, Aldebert, had moved to the area to escape violence in his hometown. The couple fled the scene, leaving very little evidence behind. They fled to a Walgreens where Christine was due to start work, and she clocked in like nothing ever happened. This was just over an hour after the horrific murders. The only evidence the police actually had to go off were the descriptions of the suspects from eyewitnesses in the neighbourhood who saw the pair leave. Police actually initially thought that the deaths were just substance related, but 3 years in, the truth was revealed. During this time, the murderous pair had broken up. Christopher ended up going to prison for stealing a car, and Christine went to rehab in Texas. While there, she met a man called Stanley Rott, and the pair would end up getting married. Now, this was in March 2005, and Stanley had no idea of the horrors that had gone on in 2003. It wasn't until Christine saw a news report on the TV with a police sketch of her that she decided to come clean to her husband. Instead of leaving her, he actually helped her evade police. The pair went into hiding for an entire year in San Antonio until police received an anonymous tip. Christine was arrested at the motel and Stanley told police what he knew. Christine tried to blame her ex and the pair were charged with murder. Frustratingly though, before police could get their hands on Christopher, in 2006 he took his own life. Christine was found guilty and was sentenced to life. She's never admitted to a motive for the crimes, but psychiatrists have speculated that it may have been due to jealousy. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.